3 months into the mission to redeem the villain. The system informed me I'd targeted the wrong person. The one I'd been showering with daily care and warmth wasn't the tragic antagonist after all. It was Julian, the male lead of this novel cold as an ice prince. No wonder Julian always gave me cold looks. He never needed this kind of concern in the first place. I quickly switched targets and grew closer to the real villain instead. Yet Julian went mad, chaining me up with golden shackles. His voice brimmed with resentment and obsession. Chloe, why won't you save me? Everyone knows I'm Julian's #1 fan. They think I'm hopelessly devoted to him, but they don't know that my tireless, dutiful care for Julian doesn't stem from affection. It's because he's the villain I need to save, to prevent this socially isolated, impoverished antagonist from ultimately becoming a danger to society. I worked hard to bring him warmth, offering kindness like a spring breeze, all in hopes that he wouldn't stray down the wrong path and become twisted. Yet after 3 months of effort, I saw no change in Julian. He remained like an evergreen tree laden with frost, cold and distant. Until today, I had just finished buying breakfast for Julian. The system informed me that due to some data errors, there had been a mistake in the information. The person I had been targeting all this time wasn't actually the real villain. It was that unattainable male lead character. No wonder every time I found excuses to give Julian things, his eyes were always filled with bewilderment. The expressions of the friends around him were also quite peculiar. After all this time, it turns out I had the wrong person from the very beginning. Carrying breakfast, I walked into school absent-mindedly. Someone nearby whistled teasingly. Chloe, what delicious treats did you bring for our campus king today? By the way, in the story, Julian is the male lead, a prominent figure on campus. He comes from a wealthy family, excels academically, is a standout at school, and the object of many girls' admiration. How on earth did I mistake someone like him for that pitiable villain back then? I held my forehead in frustration. The commotion was loud, and Julian, not far away, heard it too. He turned his head to look at me. Instinctively, I hid the bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich in my hand. I had naively thought he was the perpetually hungry villain, which was why I wanted to feed him until he was strong and healthy. But now this kind of street breakfast, how could it possibly be worthy of that transcendent, unattainable male lead? I averted my gaze, looking around aimlessly, when a figure suddenly caught my eye. He wore a gray hoodie hunched his shoulders, and his overly long hair nearly covered his ears. It was the villain Leo. My eyes lit up as I rushed to his side. Leo. The boy trembled slightly, as if trying to avoid me. I grabbed his hand and unceremoniously shoved the breakfast into it. I accidentally bought too much breakfast. Help me finish one portion. Leo opened his mouth to refuse, but the loud growling of his stomach left him with no ground to stand on. He silently curled his fingers tighter around the paper bag, murmuring a soft thank you under his breath. See, this is how a proper rescue mission should go. Julian never once said thank you to me. I happily raised my head only to find Julian still standing in the same spot. His gaze remained fixed on me, perhaps influenced by the rumors everyone says I'm completely under his thumb. Seeing Julian's expression, I instinctively grew a little nervous. It felt like being caught red-handed after doing something wrong. No, Julian and I never had any relationship to begin with. He was just a mission target I mistakenly identified, nothing more. Fortunately, Julian averted his gaze and entered the school building first. This morning, my ears were still filled with lively chatter. Many people have been asking me if I had a fight with Julian or if I've fallen for someone else. I explained to each of them, no fight, no falling for someone else. Considering Julian and I won't have any further interactions in the future, I felt the need to clarify I never liked Julian in the first place. There never was before, and there never will be. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone in other classes knew about it too. Julian's close friend Matt came to find me. Chloe, what did you mean this morning? Don't you know Julian doesn't every morning? Matt, before he could finish, a stern voice cut him off. Julian walked over and gave me a faint glance. As indifferent as ever, completely unruffled, he turned to Matt. What nonsense are you spouting? The latter pursed his lips, but ultimately said nothing more. Julian, I raised my head. Come to the rooftop. At noon, I have something to tell you. Matt suddenly grinned and asked with a playful wink what, planning to confess to him. He was always talkative and never serious. I couldn't be bothered with him, focusing solely on Julian instead. It wasn't until Julian gave a slight nod that I finally relaxed, smiling as I said, then I'll wait for you. The morning passed in a blur, and at lunchtime, I found myself sitting next to Leo. She couldn't help but serve him an extra portion of food. By the time I finished eating and ran up to the rooftop, Julian was already waiting for me. His white shirt and black hair were slightly tousled by the wind, giving him a more youthful appearance compared to his usual unapproachable demeanor. His jade-like straight nose bridge and crimson thin lips seemed to curve into a faint smile. Chloe, what did you want to talk about? Well, first I want to apologize to you, I said very seriously. I'm truly sorry for bothering you all this time. Yes, not Leo. He doesn't need those things though. It was the system's mistake. I genuinely troubled him for 3 months. His lips pressed into a thin line, returning to their usual icy demeanor. His voice carried a chill. As well, what did you say? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I kept apologizing. I'll never do that again. I was afraid he wouldn't believe me, so I quickly raised my hand. It's true. If you don't believe me, I can swear. Swear the most vicious oath, a deadly vow. Julian's lips curled up, but there wasn't a trace of smile in his eyes. Instead, they were surging with an intense emotion I couldn't comprehend. This version of Julian sent a sudden chill down my spine, making me instinctively take a step back. Julian closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, that emotion had vanished without a trace. He said in a flat tone, no need. I couldn't tell whether he was satisfied or not, so I tentatively asked, then how would you like me to apologize? Write a written guarantee. Julian lowered his gaze. No need, you can go. It seems he has forgiven me eagerly. I asked, actually I have one more small request. Go ahead, you've definitely never worn those sneakers I gave you, right? Julian never particularly liked or used anything I gave him. I didn't understand before, but now it all makes sense. After all, he's a wealthy young master. Those shoes really didn't suit his status. They're probably gathering dust in some corner right now. Julian hesitated for 2 seconds before nodding. I immediately felt much more relieved. Then could you return them to me? All my money comes from exchanging system points. Those shoes cost me quite a fortune. Since Julian doesn't like them anyway, might as well let Leo wear them. During dinner today, I noticed the shoes Leo was wearing. The uppers had been scrubbed nearly white, and the heels looked like they'd even glued back together repeatedly, still barely holding on by a thread. Maybe it was just my imagination, but Julian's expression seemed to darken even further. The last word was practically spat out through clenched teeth. 3. I gave those shoes to Leo instead. He looked extremely uneasy. Why are you giving me these? Consider it an early birthday present. Leo's birthday was just a few days away. His usually pale, bloodless cheeks flushed slightly pink as he smiled at me. Thank you. He always accepted every kindness with great seriousness and gratitude. It was completely different from Julian's behavior of indifferently lifting an eyelid before tossing things under the table. When approaching Leo, the first casually made up an excuse. I told him he had helped me before, though he himself had forgotten. Leo took it at face value and even felt genuinely sorry to make it up to me. He offered to tutor me with my studies. My grades were fabricated by the system, neither particularly good nor bad. I had both strengths and weaknesses, and my weak subjects happened to be Leo's specialties. I didn't refuse. Sure. During lunch break, I sat under the shade of a tree enjoying the breeze. Leo followed me while holding a textbook, dutifully explaining the material to me. I listened absent-mindedly, catching sight of Julian passing by with a group of boys from the corner of my eye. Julian glanced over, his gaze landing on Leo's feet. For some reason, I felt inexplicably guilty and subtly moved to block his view. What's there to feel guilty about? It's not like we have any relationship anyway. These were shoes Julian would never wear in the first place. I met his gaze with righteous confidence. A fleeting shadow of malice flashed through Julian's eyes, too quick to clearly discern. By the time I tried to get a better look, Julian had already resumed his usual indifferent expression and walked ahead. In the evening, I received a note. It was from Julian asking me to meet him in the sports equipment room after school. Was he going to confront me about these shoes? The thought flashed through my mind, but I quickly pushed it away. Julian wouldn't care about these shoes. Still, I went to the equipment room as promised. The door was ajar with a round basketball wedged in the doorway. I picked up the ball, pushed the door open, and walked in. Julian was there counting equipment with a notebook in hand. July started to call out to him when the door suddenly slammed shut with a loud bang, locking firmly behind me. I hurriedly tried to turn the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. It's actually broken. Julian finally turned his face toward me. What are you doing here? Seeing the basketball in my hand, he said unhurriedly, the equipment room door is broken. It can only be opened from the outside. This basketball, he didn't continue, but the implication was already clear. The basketball that had been propping the door open had been picked up by me. So the door was locked shut, and neither of us could get out. The equipment room was in the most remote southeast corner of the school, where people rarely came. Let alone in the evening when all classes had already ended. I had no one to contact here in the first place, and Julian didn't bring his phone. This is just the worst luck. I sat dejectedly on the nearby cushion. After calmly finishing his inventory, Julian casually took a seat beside me. He took the note without any change in expression, probably just mad as Frank. I could believe that Matt was never the most reliable person to begin with, and he firmly believed I had fallen for someone else, that I'd wronged Julian. Sorry, Julian said softly. It's fine, really. I waved my hand. Let us call it even. After all, I've caused you plenty of trouble before. The silence lingered for a few seconds before Julian suddenly spoke. It wasn't trouble. The afterglow of the setting sun streamed in, casting a few rays into Julian's eyes. His pupils radiated a golden glow and warmth entirely unlike their usual state. What you did for me wasn't a bother. I was momentarily stunned. Julian suddenly leaned in, his lips nearly touching mine, our breaths mingling. Chloe, why give it to him? The distance was too close. I felt my brain growing oxygen deprived, instinctively leaning back. The person beside me pressed down, effortlessly gripping my hand and leaving me no room to escape. Julian, who had always been aloof and imposing, now furrowed his brows, his tone even carrying a hint of grievance as he questioned me. That was mine. Why did you give it to him? Though Julian didn't explicitly say it, I immediately understood he was referring to those shoes. The pair of shoes I had taken back from him and then given to Leo. Yet there was no reason to believe Julian would care about such an insignificant pair of shoes. The boy's gaze lingered on my neck, his warm breath brushing against my collarbone. It tickled. I instinctively shrank back. Julian. The person on top of me paused for a moment, but he still didn't let go, as if stubbornly waiting for my answer. I forced myself to explain. I thought you wouldn't like it. When I gave it to him, he just casually unwrapped it and glanced at it. Matt was still egging it on from the side. Julian doesn't like this kind of thing. He'd never wear it. Just as he said, Julian indeed hadn't worn them. No, Julian denied. I don't dislike them. Then I felt somewhat embarrassed. Could it be that Julian actually liked those shoes? But recently, all my money had been spent taking care of Leo. You owe me compensation, Julian demanded unreasonably, his eyes fixed intently on me. Like a wolf contemplating which part of its prey is the most tender and easiest to bite. My heart tightened. How should I compensate you? Julian didn't answer me, but slowly leaned down instead. His handsome face loomed infinitely closer before me, radiating an aggressive aura of danger. I couldn't help but close my eyes. The next second, a finger lightly brushed away the stray hairs at my temple. The weight pressing down on me lifted slightly as Julian's voice faded into the distance. "I'll owe you one." When I opened my eyes, he was already sitting perfectly upright. His pristine white shirt remained spotless, making him seem utterly unattainable. I slowly sat up, subtly putting more distance between us. The last glimmer of daylight faded, leaving only a few street lamps on the playground. Drowsy, with my knees hugged to my chest, I tilted sideways, not onto the mat, but into a warm, soft embrace. Julian had somehow returned to sit beside me again. I hurriedly tried to sit up, but Julian's arm firmly held me in place as he commanded in an unyielding tone, "Sleep like this." I couldn't break free, so I simply tilted my head to find a comfortable sleeping position and went back to sleep. Julian's voice suddenly came from above. "Do you and Leo do this too?" "Of course not," Julian replied with a faint smile at the corners of his lips. I mumbled, "Leo and I would never get locked in a storage room." Julian's smile froze. He seemed deeply dissatisfied with this answer and proceeded to pester me with numerous questions about Leo. He asked about what Leo and I usually ate, what we did together, demanding that I recount every detail exhaustively. Drowsily brushing him off, I couldn't help wondering, was Julian really this concerned and invested in Leo's affairs? Fortunately, Julian finally quieted down, burying my face deeper into the soft surface. I, at last, drifted into peaceful sleep. Between dreams and wakefulness, I seemed to hear a soft click sound. I was picked up by someone feeling unsteady as I swayed. A voice gently soothed me. "It's alright, go back to sleep." 5 the next day, I opened my eyes to see the familiar ceiling. If not for the red mark on my wrist left by Julian's grip, I might have thought everything that happened last night was just a dream. But how did Julian send me back? How did he know my address? My mind was full of questions, but I didn't have time to dwell on them. I splashed my face with cold water and rushed straight to school. When I arrived at the classroom with breakfast, as usual, I found Leo's desk already piled high with offerings. A wide variety, a dazzling array. Matt grinned, revealing a row of white teeth, and said, "I bought too much today too, so let classmate Leo help finish some." It's naturally a good thing that Leo can make friends with more people. But my breakfast, before I could figure out how to handle it, Matt snatched the bag from my hands and placed it on Julian's desk. "Perfect, Julian hasn't had breakfast yet today, so this can go to him. I happen to have something to ask him." "Matt, was that note you wrote for me yesterday afternoon?" "A note?" Matt froze for a second, then showed a subtle, yet sympathetic expression. "Just assume I wrote it." I frowned, wanting to press further, when a tall shadow loomed behind me. A cool voice spoke, "Move aside." I turned my head to see Julian staring at me with those indifferent eyes of his, showing not a trace of familiarity. He looked completely different from the somewhat childish yet fierce demeanor he had last night. Julian was the first to avert his gaze, glancing at the breakfast on the table. Matt pointed at me. "She brought this especially for you." I was about to explain when I heard Julian give a quiet "hm." His expression was, as usual, neither showing happiness nor unhappiness. "Fine, consider breakfast as payment for him taking me home last night." Little did I know this was just the beginning. At lunchtime, Leo had barely sat down when Matt swiftly took the seat across from him. Then Julian immediately settled in beside Leo, completely separating Leo and me. Matt even picked up his plate and poured food into Leo's bowl. "Here, eat more." His enthusiasm was so genuine, he seemed more like the mission executor than I did. Was this professional rivalry? I grabbed Matt's arm. "With love in your heart. With love in your heart, save the villain." This was the unified slogan of the villain redemption system. If Matt had been bound to the system, he should have been able to complete the next line instantly. But several seconds passed, and the expected follow-up never came. Matt nearly jumped like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Stealing glances at Julian's reaction, he loudly protested, "There's no love between us, none at all." I pouted my lips. So what if there's no love? No need to get so worked up about it. Matt always managed to, but in precisely when I was about to spend time with Leo, as if he memorized our every move. Thanks to him, even though I hadn't lifted a finger, the mission progress kept advancing steadily. A few days later, I received another card. On it was written a restaurant's address and a scheduled time. The signature read Julian. This time I got smarter and didn't foolishly run over again. Instead, I tossed the card into the trash bin and curled up comfortably on the sofa to watch TV. At 9 o'clock in the evening, the phone rang urgently. As soon as I answered, a voice brimming with suppressed anger came through. "Chloe." "Julian," he accused. "Why didn't you come? I waited for 3 hours." Suddenly remembering the card I'd thrown in the trash, I cautiously asked, "Wasn't that Matt's prank?" Julian on the other end of the line seemed momentarily speechless, clearing his throat before saying no. Feeling awkward, I admitted, "I thought it was like last time." "I'll have someone pick you up now," Julian said in a commanding tone before hanging up. The system immediately popped up in a panic. "Host, something terrible has happened. The villain's corruption level has increased." Leo had always been a person with very low presence. He had no friends, kept his distance from others, and appeared thoroughly gloomy. But deep down he yearned for sunlight. He wasn't the traditional kind of malicious villain. His personality became twisted only after enduring countless pains and torments. A crucial turning point in Leo's descent into darkness occurred when he was 19 years old. His gambling-addicted father having racked up loan shark debts hid back at home only for the debt collectors to come knocking. Leo happened to be home and was sold by his deranged father to settle the debt. Leo tried to escape only to have his leg broken and be forced to press his fingerprint as consent. He had to drop out of school, and that injured leg never received proper treatment. Later, as he struggled alone on the fringes of society, this disability subjected him to constant disdain and mockery. This gradually forged an even darker psyche within him, but this event wasn't supposed to happen until a month later. Though I didn't know what caused it to happen ahead of schedule, the only thing I could do now was try my best to protect Leo. As soon as the system located Leo's address, I immediately called the police, and then hailed a ride-hailing car to rush over. The book's description of this segment was too detailed, making Leo's tragic state linger in my mind. My nerves were stretched taut. My phone vibrated against me several times before I finally reacted. Hello. You're not home. Julian's tone was unpleasant. Where are you? I have something urgent right now, and probably can't make it over. After all, Leo's matter had nothing to do with Julian. There was no need to drag him into it. I'll explain next time. The moment she hung up, what seemed like the faint sound of knuckles cracking came through the phone, along with an impatient shout, have you located it yet? I didn't have time to think much, assuming he had other matters to attend to. Fortunately, the police responded quickly. By the time I arrived, the loan sharks had already been subdued. Leo lay weakly on the ground, his clothes covered in dust and splattered with bloodstains. My heart leaped into my throat as I immediately reached to feel his leg, checking for any deformities. Are you okay? Does it hurt? Leo forced a faint smile. I'm fine. Still unconvinced, I wanted to examine him further, when suddenly someone grabbed the back collar of my shirt, and a hand shot out to seize my wrist. Julian pulled me away by the waist with displeasure. You're not a doctor. I widened my eyes in confusion. How are you here? Wasn't he supposed to be at the restaurant? Julian's gaze flickered slightly, just passing by. Leo was helped up by the police and taken to the hospital for examination. Naturally, I had to go along too, but first I turned to the shadow that had been following me everywhere and said, you go back first. Julian's sword-like eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean? I didn't understand why he was suddenly angry again, so I softened my voice and said, I can take care of Leo myself. There's no need to trouble you. Saving the villain was my mission, not Julian's. Julian's steps faltered, most of his face hidden in darkness, his visible jawline taut with suppressed anger. Yet an unmistakable trace of disappointment seeped through his demeanor, like an angry yet sorrowful dog abandoned by its owner. But he said nothing more. I turned and took 2 steps forward when suddenly a panic shout came from behind Chloe. The voice carried boundless terror, even sounding somewhat shrill. Everyone was startled and turned to look in unison. Before I could even see what was happening, a figure lunged forward and shielded me beneath them with crushing force. Then came the sickening sound of something heavy slamming into flesh right beside my ear. So close I could almost touch it. The metallic scent of blood flooded my nostrils. Julian is injured. The sounds of the world seemed to fade away for several seconds, and my heart momentarily stopped beating in that blank void. Julian, everyone was stunned by this sudden turn of events. Yet in that split second, I remembered the detail I had overlooked. The book mentioned there were 5 loan sharks in total, but because Leo's father was also arrested, I had naturally overlooked this fact. One of them managed to escape using the information extracted by the system. I quickly and accurately described the fugitive's features. Soon the escaped individual was apprehended. According to his confession, he had overheard me calling the police while hiding next door, which secretly fueled his desire for revenge. His crimes were severe enough to land him in prison for a very long time. But Julian's injury was already irreversible. Perhaps my expression of frustration and self-reproach was too obvious for Julian. His head wrapped in bandages comforted me. Instead, I'm fine, don't worry. Just then the doctor who walked in undermined his words. Right now, it's just a concussion. If the impact had been slightly off, you'd be dead. If it had been me who was hit, I might have really died on the spot. Gazing at Julian, who was trying to ease my emotions with a rare gentle smile, a long lingering ache welled up in my nose. For the first time in my life, someone had thrown themselves in front of me without hesitation. Julian, I grasped his hand and gazed at him earnestly. Thank you. The boy's ears gradually flushed red, and his usually cold jade-like face also began glowing with a rosy hue. He abruptly withdrew his hand, averting his gaze awkwardly. Don't be so reckless in the future. Julian's injury was no trivial matter. The Julian family was practically ready to dispatch a helicopter immediately to transfer him to another hospital, along with hiring 30 specialists to conduct a thorough, all-encompassing examination. But Julian refused. He wouldn't even take a private room, choosing instead to share a double room with Leo. The Julian family's assistant looked miserable as he asked me to persuade him. I had barely started when Julian's face suddenly darkened. Do you really not want to see me that much? I feel wronged, I said. I didn't. Then why are you trying to send me away? His voice lowered. Last night was the same. I know you only want to take care of Leo. Last night's situation was different from now. Besides, I didn't even get to take care of Leo properly. Just as I was about to pour water for Leo, he started whining that his head hurt a little and asked me to feed him the water. I spoke to Leo, and he immediately started coughing uncontrollably, the fits growing louder and more violent, as if he were trying to cough up his lungs. The alarmed doctors rushed over repeatedly to examine him, terrified of worsening his condition. Leo seemed to have guessed something was amiss, and pulled the blanket over his head to sleep. This finally calmed Julian down a bit. He hastily pressed the button for the privacy curtain between the hospital beds, isolating just the 2 of us in our own space. Chloe. Julian raised his hand, and as I approached, it curved naturally to encircle me. I instinctively wanted to push away, but feared hurting him. Julian. Don't move, he closed his eyes, stay with me for a while. From last night until now he'd only slept a few hours. The doctors had advised him to rest properly, but Julian insisted on keeping his eyes open as if stubbornly challenging someone. I couldn't bear to push him away. Alright, since we couldn't persuade him to transfer hospitals, Julian's family focused all their efforts on improving this hospital room. They replaced the bed with a more spacious and comfortable one, plenty of room for both of us. His hand resting on me occasionally toyed with the ends of my hair. I gave his fingertips a warning squeeze. Julian. His voice sounded somewhat languid, carrying a lingering undertone. The words urging him to sleep properly suddenly died in my throat against my will. Another question that had been weighing on my mind slipped out. Why did you save me? Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? The slightest mistake, just as the doctor said, and he might never wake up again. Julian remained silent for several seconds, and my heart hung in suspense along with it. I didn't know what kind of answer I was truly longing for. Julian suddenly ruffled my hair vigorously. You were already a bit slow to begin with. What if getting hit makes you even slower? My heart, which had nearly leapt into my throat, settled back down. Oh, I brushed away his still mischievous hand, inexplicably indignant. You're the slow one. If you weren't slow, would you need Leo to tutor you? The conversation kept circling back to Leo again. I wisely shut my mouth, and didn't respond further. After lying quietly for a while, a faint rustling sound came from beside me, as if someone was deliberately moving with light steps. Julian called softly twice, Chloe, Chloe. Wanting to see what he was up to, I kept my eyes closed and pretended to be fast asleep. A suppressed breath drew near me. Suddenly, a fleeting kiss landed on my forehead, light as a feather's touch. My heartbeat seemed to skip half a beat. The spring clamored outside, yet this tiny space was unnervingly quiet. Amplified heartbeats tangled together, making it hard to tell whose pulse was racing. 8. The guy who injured Julian and his accomplices, their backgrounds were thoroughly investigated by Julian's family. Their past criminal deeds were laid out one by one. With the Julian family's top-tier legal team on the case, it's unlikely they'll ever recover from this. Leo's injuries weren't serious, and he was discharged after just a few days of rest. Julian finally agreed to transfer to a private ward. He had someone prepare a complete set of study materials, saying he intended to tutor me properly. I quietly took a step back. That wouldn't be necessary. In my original world, I had already started working. I really didn't want to go through that painful process of being bombarded with massive amounts of knowledge again right now. Julian let out a cold laugh at this. Are you saying my explanations aren't as good as Leo's? Alright, I surrendered helplessly. I'm listening. But in the end, I still couldn't focus, and soon my thoughts began to drift away. Julian mercilessly pinched my cheek. Were you like this when Leo was talking to you too? I really was. I nodded honestly. His expression softened strangely as he set the book aside and casually asked, what are your plans for the future? Life is a long journey and people inevitably face many choices. What kind of job to choose, which city to live in? Julian was asking me about my plans for the future, but he didn't know that I actually came from another world and would be leaving soon. Leo didn't have a broken leg. He could still attend classes normally and take exams without trouble. Matt has been spending a lot of time with him lately, even taking him to play basketball together, and gradually he has made a few friends. Once his exams are over and he steps onto a brand new life path, he won't become that bullied quasi-villain anymore. My mission will be complete. Then when that time comes, I'll leave this task world. So I can't answer Julian's question. We'll talk about it when the time comes. I rubbed my nose and said quietly, maybe I'll go somewhere else. Where? Julian's gaze sharpened, his expression turning serious. Where are you going? Those eyes were unusually piercing, as if they could see through everything, penetrate straight to a person's soul. I lowered my head evasively and mumbled, I'm not going anywhere. Chloe, don't lie to me. Julian's voice was calm, but the obsessive undertone beneath that restraint was almost imperceptible. He gripped my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. Otherwise, I don't know what else I might do. 9. The following days passed without incident. Julian recovered well, and Leo was also doing fine. Several months flew by in the blink of an eye. With Julian's family involved, the sentencing of that group was swiftly concluded. Perhaps one day they will emerge, but by then Leo will have grown strong enough to no longer fear their threats. My mission is complete. The system is online. Villain's corruption value 0. Save the villain. Mission progress 100. Congratulations, host, on completing the mission. Please choose whether to exit immediately. On the left is yes, on the right is no. I hesitated, and then Julian walked over Chloe. Even though I knew he couldn't see it, I hurriedly hid the control panel. What's up? Get ready, we're going to eat later. Julian seemed a bit hesitant. A little later, I have something I want to talk to you about. Alright, I nodded. I also had something to say to Julian. Ever since Julian got injured, we'd been sharing 9 out of 10 meals together. I hadn't thought much of it. I just didn't expect tonight to be Julian's birthday party. Surrounded by the crowd listening to congratulatory speeches, not a trace of joy showed between his brows. He seemed quite impatient. I sat apart from the crowd, silently taking a glass of wine from a waiter's tray. I didn't know what Julian wanted to say to me, but the words I needed to say to him made me feel cowardly. So, I had to drink for courage. Leo was brought over by Matt. When he saw me, he approached and thanked me somewhat awkwardly. You're welcome. With alcohol surging through me, I swayed as I stood up, grinning broadly and giving his shoulder a hearty pat. I'm here to save you. Chloe, my hand was seized tightly, and the person glaring at me was furious. Who are you here to save? The rescue mission couldn't be revealed, so I quickly shook my head. Nothing. Julian pressed his lips together tightly, then suddenly scooped me up in his arms and carried me outside. Julian, I murmured against his chest, slow down, you're making me dizzy. Can't hold your liquor, yet dared drink so much. Julian's tone was gruff, but his steps became noticeably steadier. The alcohol must have really emboldened me. I wriggled out of Julian's embrace, then swiftly climbed onto his back. With a better view now, I happily waved my arms. We stop fooling around, Julian said helplessly, though he didn't actually stop me. Julian, I called him the way Matt did, pinching his ear and blowing on it. I need to talk to you. Julian held me with one hand while covering his ear with the other. What is it? Happy birthday. He showed his first smile of the day. Got it. One more thing. He turned his head. What? I'm leaving, I announced loudly into his ear. I had rehearsed this line several times, and when it finally came out it was surprisingly smooth. But for some reason my heart felt inexplicably heavy. Probably because my nose was stuffy, I rubbed my face vigorously against Julian's neck. The person I was rubbing against stiffened abruptly. What did you say? I have to go back, I murmured. We might never see each other again. Before I could finish speaking, Julian pried me off by peeling away my clinging limbs. Julian pinned me against the wall, his voice hoarse. Chloe explained clearly. What do you mean by never see you again? Never see you again means never. Julian's lips pressed against mine without warning, silencing the rest of my words with a searing kiss. His breath plundered mine between our lips and teeth until I could barely breathe. My legs weakened, leaving me no choice but to cling helplessly to him. Chloe, his eyes were bloodshot. You lied to me. 10. When I woke up the next day, my head was still a bit fuzzy. Memories slowly and painfully returned. I said goodbye to Julian and confessed that I was leaving. Then, he kissed me until I passed out. I bolted upright, but before I could even feel embarrassed, I took in the unfamiliar surroundings and thought in confusion, where am I? This room is 10 times larger than my shabby little apartment, with exquisitely refined decor and layout. Yet beyond the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows lies neither elegant gardens nor towering skyscrapers, but rather undulating mountain ranges stretching as far as the eye can see. Could I have returned to the real world, or perhaps I'm still not fully awake? I dryly comforted myself. I raised my hand, and a series of delicate crystalline sounds followed the movement. I only just noticed the golden bracelet clasped around my wrist, with a chain still attached to it. Following the end of the chain, I found the other end embedded in the wall. My pupils trembled. Who am I? Where am I? In an instant, 108 cruel ways to die rolled through my mind, one after another. As I contemplated the 109th possibility, the door to the room swung open, revealing an all too familiar face. Julian, my heart instantly settled, the terror and unease dissipating like mist. Yet within 2 seconds, I keenly sensed something amiss. Julian's expression remained unchanged as always, but our recent days of constant companionship allowed me to perceive the turbulent undercurrents beneath his calm exterior. Julian, I swallowed hard, breaking the eerie silence. Where is this place? A mountain village. Julian walked toward me, his slender fingers brushing against the shackles on my wrists. There's no one else here. His voice carried an elusive delight, just the two of us. The boy who had smiled at me just yesterday morning, telling me not to be nervous and to do well on my exam, seemed to have transformed into someone completely different in an instant. Those pale eyes were like a falcon's openly seizing upon its prey. I felt my heart trembling, forcing out a faint smile. You're joking, right? Julian cradled my face with a gentle yet pitying gaze, the corners of his lips lifting slightly, though his curved eyes held not a trace of warmth. Moments later, he unhurriedly unlocked the shackles and led me to see the full view outside. The villa was surrounded by mountains, with only the occasional chirping of birds breaking the silence. There's a basement here, Julian murmured, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on the crook of my neck. His tone was so intimate it sent chills down my spine. I originally wanted you to live down there. A cold shiver ran down my back as I trembled uncontrollably. July. Don't be afraid. Cool fingertips brushed across my lips. How could I let you live in such a place? Even someone as slow as me understood Julian had imprisoned me. In this mission world, my social circle was extremely small. No one would notice my disappearance. Even if someone did, with the Julian family's methods, it could be covered up seamlessly. After scanning the area, the system said helplessly, host, there are no additional escape routes here. The only path is the mountain loop road outside the main gate. I wouldn't make it more than a few steps before Julian catches me. If that happens, he might truly lose his mind and lock me in the basement. Besides, Julian had been sticking to me like a shadow, making sure I remained within his sight at all times. The entire villa was empty except for us, with Julian handling everything personally. He had an almost perverse level of control over me, to the point where he'd gladly have taken over even my bathroom breaks and showers. Under my strong resistance, he reluctantly gave up. At night, he was surprisingly proper, lying on a quilt spread on the floor. The mountain night was chilly and Julian had been injured before. I was a bit worried, so I silently pushed half the quilt toward him. How about you come up and sleep here? As soon as I said it, I regretted it, but Julian had already leapt into action. He embraced me through the blanket. Chloe, stay by my side. 1 The voice was like a plea whispered into the dust, his arms tightened, eyes brimming with obsession. You promised to save me. I froze, never expecting that the words I'd casually spoken back then were something he'd always remembered. When I first arrived in this world, I asked around about Julian. The student I asked casually pointed to someone going upstairs. Julian, that's him. The tall, handsome young man seemed completely unaware that he was the center of discussion. I thought about the mission assigned by the system and decided to get to know him first. Perhaps it was a bit of nervousness that made her slip, sending her flying straight into a cool, refreshing embrace. I am sorry, I hastily apologized. He lowered his gaze, indifferently released me, and continued walking forward. Julian, my hand moved faster than my thoughts, grabbing his arm. I'm Chloe. His voice was as cold as his face. So what? My mind went blank for a moment, and the words slipped out, I'm here to save you. The young man raised an eyebrow slightly, then suddenly revealed a faint smile. That smile was like the melting spring snow of March illuminating the radiance between heaven and earth. All right, he said, I'll wait for you to save me. But in reality, the person I needed to save was never him. I didn't know how to explain this absurd mistake, so I vaguely said back then I was just saying it casually. After a long pause, he let out a mocking chuckle. What should we do then, Julian? Said Chloe. I believed every word you spoke. Whether it was me saying I wanted to save him, or me declaring I wouldn't go anywhere. 12. The system stated that after completing the mission, the maximum retention period stay is only 7 days. Mission executors cannot simply vanish into thin air, though it's merely a formality. They must leave this world in a normal manner. For instance, car accidents, jumping off buildings, drowning, etc. Originally, there were many ways this body of mine could have met its end, but now it seems I'm out of options. Jump now, the system urged me. Julian will be back soon. The system used a special method to force Julian away temporarily. Picking the lock proved quite troublesome. In the end, I had to use the corner of the nightstand to forcibly break the end embedded in the wall before I could drag the long chain and regain my freedom. Now all I needed to do was jump from the balcony and I could return to my original world. Success was within reach, yet I couldn't feel the slightest joy. I straddled the railing with the path back on one side and Julian on the other. He had been reluctant to leave when answering the phone call, stepping out only to turn back and kiss me. I'll be right back. Chloe, I'll bring you that cake you love. Julian whispered to coax me. Wait for me to come back, okay? The system urged me to agree with him. Quickly, I hesitated for a long while before finally nodding. Julian's smile relaxed a little. I'll come back as soon as I can. He didn't know that the matter making him leave was arranged by the system, its purpose being to delay him the longer the better. What if he comes back and doesn't see me? Would he be very sad? Would he shed tears for me? Scenes from the past flashed before my eyes one by one, yet I couldn't bring myself to make a decision. It seemed like I was waiting for something, but what exactly I was waiting for I couldn't say. Probably the little cake, Julian said. He'd bring me. I was really craving it. Chloe, a voice cut through my chaotic thoughts. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating, but when I turned my head, I actually saw Julian standing there with a panicked expression. The system exclaimed in surprise. He came back half an hour early. Chloe, don't jump, Julian pleaded softly, as if afraid of startling me. I beg you, don't jump. You can go anywhere you want. You don't have to want me either. That person who had always been aloof and indifferent was now kneeling halfway on the ground, begging pitifully, brought low by love. My heart felt as if it had been stabbed several times. Go back, this thought rose in my heart. I wanted to walk toward him. But my legs, numb from sitting too long, refused to obey. The moment I lifted them, they gave way beneath me, and I stumbled into empty air. My body fell outward, and in the instant the fierce wind rushed past my ears, I barely caught a glimpse of the overwhelming, heart-wrenching despair in Julian's eyes. 13. My body was rushed into the emergency room. The team of 30 specialists Julian's family had prepared ones he never needed ended up being used on me instead. But it was no use. One by one the doctors came out shaking their heads, and Julian's expression gradually shifted from initial hope to a stagnant pool of lifeless calm. I met his gaze across the empty space and found an unsettling tranquility in his eyes that sent a chill through me. The body, gradually losing vital signs, was transferred by Julian to the highest level private ward. He methodically washed his face, tidied his disheveled hair, and changed into clean clothes. Chloe, Julian held my hand. You must hate me, don't you? Down in the underworld, do you also wish for me to pay with my life? My transparent form stood beside him, and though I knew he couldn't hear, I answered earnestly, no hatred, no such wish. Julian continued speaking to himself for a long while. I stayed by his side, occasionally answering some of his questions. Night fell as Julian locked the door and drew the curtains. An inexplicable sense of foreboding rose within me. I watched as Julian opened a drawer and took out a bottle of white pills. He grabbed a handful, shoved them into his mouth, and slowly chewed them down. Chloe, he lay beside me, holding me just as before. Don't be afraid. I was too shocked to speak. The system emitted a piercing alarm. The male lead has gone mad. He was insane, yet he was equally lucid, but I couldn't understand how things had come to this. Why doesn't affection fade with separation? Why can't it even be severed? What was imposed upon me in the past were curses, accusations, and abandonment. It was the door that wouldn't open for me on snowy nights, the umbrella no one held up for me in summer rains. I walked among crowds, yet remained utterly alone. I had never known love unaware. It could be such a desperate flame. One that makes people willingly burn through their lives prematurely for another's sake. Julian, I desperately tried to reach him, but my consciousness suddenly plunged into a dark ocean. Seconds later, I woke up dizzy and disoriented, finding myself lying in a hospital room. Beside me lay an unconscious Julian. Frantically pressing the call button by the bed, while shaking him, I cried, wake up, please wake up. Chloe, he squinted at me. How wonderful to see you again so soon. He probably thought he'd already reached the underworld and was reuniting with us. In my panic, I slapped him hard across the face. Snap out of it. Julian clutched his stinging cheek in confusion for a moment before grabbing my shoulders in wild excitement. Chloe. He rushed out of bed to open the door, collapsing onto the arriving medical staff. Pumped my stomach. After nearly half a night of chaos, Julian and I lay side by side in hospital beds. The system had used special methods. I felt no physical pain. Julian, who just had his stomach pumped, looked far weaker than I did. But he stubbornly refused to close his eyes as if afraid all of this was just a dream. Julian, I waved at him, come here. His eyes brightened for a moment, but quickly dimmed again. Chloe, I won't force you anymore. I blurted out casually, I can't sleep without you beside me. Fine, don't come over then. Julian didn't hesitate for even a second before immediately moving onto my bed. He carefully wrapped his arms around me. I spoke up, Julian, I won't leave again. Someone nearby whistled and teased, Chloe, what are you giving the campus king today? Julian didn't seem entirely convinced, but he played along with a quiet response. Who can blame him given my long history of deception? I wanted to reassure him, I can swear, make the most solemn vow. No need then, shall I write a pledge? No need. What should I do then? I didn't know how to prove it to him. I truly like you very much. This time there was no response for a long while. Just as I was about to poke him, I felt a patch of cool dampness soaking through my shoulder. Not the despair of loss, but the ineffable joy of something lost and found again. Chloe, Julian's voice was hoarse. Stop lying to me. I won't lie to you anymore, I said solemnly. I love you, and I won't leave again. After dying in a car accident, I accepted the system's mission conditions. Save the villain, and you can return to your original world. I never thought I'd leave behind any attachments or connections here. After all, I've always been someone no one cares about, but I'll care for myself. Complete the mission, then leave. That's always been my plan. But I never expected to encounter Julian by sheer coincidence. I had thought about staying, and after falling from the building I believed it was fate's choice. Yet the one thing I never anticipated was that someone would rather tear apart fate's arrangements just to reunite with me in another world. Fortunately, after all the twists and turns, he still came to me without hesitation. The end.